Ted Bundy remains one of the most infamous and chilling figures in the history of American crime. Born on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont, Bundy was raised in a family dynamic that was far from conventional. His mother, Eleanor Cowell, was unmarried at the time of his birth, and to avoid societal shame, Bundy was raised as though his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. This revelation, which Bundy discovered later in life, had a profound and disturbing impact on his psyche. As Bundy grew older, he appeared to be a normal, charismatic, and intelligent young man. He graduated from the University of Washington and even pursued law school. However, beneath this polished exterior lay a disturbed individual with a thirst for control and violence. His killing spree began in the 1970s, targeting young women, often those who resembled an ex-girlfriend who had rejected him. Bundy's modus operandi involved feigning injury, often wearing a cast or using crutches, to gain the trust of his victims. Once they were close enough, he would abduct them, take them to secluded areas, and brutally murder them. Bundy's crimes spanned 7 states and resulted in the deaths of at least 30 women, though authorities believed the number could be significantly higher. He was exceptionally meticulous, often revisiting the bodies of his victims to perform unspeakable acts. This pattern revealed his profound need for control, even after death. Bundy's intelligence and manipulative nature allowed him to evade capture for years. When he was finally arrested, he managed to escape custody twice, further perpetuating his reign of terror. His final capture in Florida in 1978 marked the end of his spree, but his trial captivated the nation. Bundy acted as his own defense attorney, using the courtroom as a stage to display his narcissism. Despite his attempts to charm the jury and the media, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. On January 24, 1989, Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. To this day, he remains a symbol of how evil can wear the mask of normalcy, reminding the world of the chilling duality of human nature. His story continues to fascinate and horrify, serving as a dark chapter in the annals of true crime history. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, is one of history's most infamous serial killers. Born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Dahmer's early life was marked by neglect and a lack of emotional connection. His parents' tumultuous marriage and eventual divorce left Dahmer feeling isolated and lonely. As a child, he developed a fascination with death and anatomy, often dissecting small animals, a chilling precursor to his later crimes. Dahmer committed his first murder at the age of 18 in 1978, shortly after his high school graduation. He lured a hitchhiker, Stephen Hicks, to his home, killed him, and dismembered the body. After this initial act of violence, Dahmer managed to suppress his homicidal urges for several years. However, in the late 1980s, he began a killing spree that would claim the lives of 16 more young men and boys. Dahmer's method of operation was horrifyingly calculated. He targeted individuals in gay bars, luring them to his apartment under the pretense of friendship or romance. Once there, he would drug them, strangle them, and engage in necrophilic acts. Dahmer often dismembered the bodies, preserving parts as macabre trophies. He even confessed to cannibalism, describing his need to feel a permanent connection with his victims. The horrors of Dahmer's crimes were finally exposed in 1991, when one of his intended victims, Tracy Edwards, managed to escape and alert the police. Upon entering Dahmer's apartment, authorities were met with a grisly scene: human remains, skulls, and Polaroid photos documenting his atrocities. During his trial, Dahmer pleaded guilty by reason of insanity, but the court deemed him mentally competent and sentenced him to 15 consecutive life terms. In 1994, Dahmer was killed by a fellow inmate in prison. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is a grim reminder of the capacity for evil within the human psyche. His crimes shocked the world, leaving a lasting scar on the families of his victims and the community he terrorized. Today, Dahmer's name remains synonymous with horror and depravity. Jack the Ripper, one of history's most enigmatic and infamous serial killers, terrorized London's Whitechapel district in the late 19th century. Unlike most serial killers, Jack the Ripper's identity has never been confirmed, making him a symbol of both horror and mystery. His reign of terror began in 1888, during a period of social unrest and economic disparity in London. The Whitechapel district was rife with poverty, overcrowding, and crime, creating an environment where the Ripper could operate undetected. His victims were primarily female sex workers, vulnerable women trying to survive the harsh realities of life in the slums. The Ripper targeted these women, brutally murdering and mutilating them in ways that suggested a disturbing level of anatomical knowledge. The 5 canonical victims, Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, were all killed in a span of just a few months. The gruesome nature of the murders, which included the removal of internal organs, led to widespread panic. The media sensationalized the killings, coining the name Jack the Ripper after an anonymous letter purportedly written by the killer was sent to the press. Despite an extensive police investigation and numerous suspects, Jack the Ripper was never caught. Over the years, countless theories have emerged, suggesting that the killer could have been anyone from a local butcher to a member of the British aristocracy. The lack of closure has kept the case alive in public imagination, fueling books, films, and endless speculation. Jack the Ripper's legacy endures as a haunting reminder of the darker side of humanity. His story is a chilling testament to the vulnerability of the marginalized and the failure of justice to bring closure to one of history's most infamous crime sprees. John Wayne Gacy, often referred to as the Killer Clown, is one of the most infamous serial killers in American history. Born on March 17, 1942, in Chicago, Illinois, Gacy had a troubled childhood marked by an abusive father and feelings of inadequacy. Despite these challenges, he appeared to lead a normal life as an adult, working as a successful contractor and becoming a respected member of his community. He was even known for dressing up as Pogo the Clown to entertain children at parties and charitable events, earning him his chilling nickname. Beneath this facade of normalcy, however, Gacy harbored a dark secret. Between 1972 and 1978, he murdered at least 33 young men and boys. Gacy lured his victims to his home, often under the guise of offering them work or friendship. Once there, he would handcuff them, claiming it was a magic trick, before assaulting and murdering them. Most of his victims were buried in the crawl space beneath his house, while others were discarded in nearby rivers. Gacy's double life unraveled in December 1978, when 15-year-old Robert Piest disappeared. Investigators traced Piest's last whereabouts to Gacy's home. A subsequent search revealed human remains, leading to Gacy's arrest. During his trial, Gacy attempted an insanity defense, claiming that his alter ego, Jack, was responsible for the murders. The jury rejected this argument, and he was convicted of 33 counts of murder. Gacy was sentenced to death and spent 14 years on death row before being executed by lethal injection on May 10, 1994. His case shocked the nation and highlighted the vulnerability of young, impressionable individuals to predators like Gacy. Today, he remains a symbol of the sinister duality of human nature, the ability to present a mask of kindness while hiding unimaginable evil beneath. H. Holmes, often called America's first serial killer, operated during the late 19th century and earned infamy for his murder castle. Born Herman Webster Mudgett on May 16, 1861, in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Holmes showed signs of manipulation and deceit from an early age. He graduated from medical school, where he developed a fascination with anatomy and an inclination for fraud. In the 1890s, Holmes moved to Chicago, where he constructed a 3-story building that would later be known as the Murder Castle. This structure, which he claimed was a hotel, was outfitted with trapdoors, soundproof rooms, and hidden chutes, leading to a basement filled with torture devices. The building was specifically designed to facilitate his murders and conceal his crimes. During the 1893 World's Fair, Holmes lured victims, many of them young women, into his hotel with promises of employment or lodging. Once inside, they became prisoners in his deadly labyrinth, where Holmes would torture and kill them. He later disposed of their bodies by selling skeletons to medical schools or cremating the remains. Holmes was eventually caught in 1894 for insurance fraud, but his true crimes were uncovered during the investigation. He confessed to 27 murders, though the actual number is believed to be much higher. Holmes was executed by hanging on May 7, 1896. H. Holmes remains a figure of macabre fascination, symbolizing the darkest depths of human ingenuity and cruelty. His murder castle is a haunting testament to the horrors that can be hidden behind a facade of normalcy. Aileen Wuornos is one of the most infamous female serial killers in modern history, often described as the Damsel of Death. Born on February 29, 1956, in Rochester, Michigan, Wuornos had an extremely troubled upbringing. Her father was a convicted child molester who committed suicide in prison, and her mother abandoned her at a young age. Wuornos was raised by her abusive grandparents and endured physical and emotional trauma throughout her childhood. By her teenage years, Wuornos had turned to prostitution to survive, a lifestyle she would continue into adulthood. Between 1989 and 1990, Wuornos embarked on a killing spree in Florida, murdering 7 men. She claimed that the killings were in self-defense, stating that her victims had either raped or attempted to rape her while she was working as a sex worker. However, the brutality of the murders, which involved multiple gunshot wounds, painted a more complex picture of her motives. Wuornos was arrested in January 1991 after being linked to the murders through stolen items and her fingerprints. During her trial, she initially maintained her self-defense claim, but later admitted to killing the men in cold blood. She was convicted and sentenced to death. On October 9, 2002, Wuornos was executed by lethal injection. Her life and crimes have been the subject of intense media scrutiny, documentaries, and films, including the Academy Award-winning movie Monster. Wuornos' story is often viewed as a tragic tale of abuse, survival, and the devastating consequences of a life filled with hardship and violence. Richard Ramirez, infamously known as the Night Stalker, terrorized California during the mid-1980s with a series of brutal home invasions, assaults, and murders. Born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, Ramirez grew up in a troubled household. He was heavily influenced by his older cousin, a Vietnam War veteran, who introduced him to violent and graphic imagery. This, combined with drug use and a fascination with Satanism, shaped Ramirez's dark path. Between 1984 and 1985, Ramirez embarked on a killing spree that claimed the lives of 13 people and included numerous assaults and rapes. He targeted victims at random, breaking into homes in the dead of night. His methods were horrifyingly varied: shooting, stabbing, bludgeoning, and even torturing his victims. Ramirez left behind satanic symbols at some crime scenes, fueling public fear and media frenzy. Ramirez was captured on August 31, 1985, after a group of civilians recognized him from police sketches and subdued him until authorities arrived. During his trial, Ramirez showed no remorse, famously declaring "Hail Satan" in court. He was convicted of 13 murders and sentenced to death. Ramirez spent over 2 decades on death row before dying of natural causes in 2013. His reign of terror remains one of the most infamous crime sprees in American history, a chilling example of random, unprovoked evil. Ed Gein, known as the Butcher of Plainfield, is one of the most disturbing figures in true crime history. Born on August 27, 1906, in La Crosse, Wisconsin, Gein grew up in an isolated and oppressive household. His domineering mother, Augusta, was a strict religious fanatic who instilled in him a deep-seated hatred for women, considering them sinful and impure. Gein's father was an alcoholic, and his childhood was marked by abuse and emotional neglect. After the death of his father, brother, and eventually his mother, Gein was left alone on their family farm. His isolation and unhealthy fixation on his mother fueled a descent into madness. Gein began visiting cemeteries, exhuming bodies, and using the remains to create macabre items such as lampshades, belts, and masks made from human skin. His obsession with anatomy and the human body was deeply disturbing, but it wasn't until 1957 that his gruesome activities came to light. The disappearance of local hardware store owner Bernice Worden led police to Gein's farmhouse. Inside, authorities discovered a nightmarish scene: human remains, skulls used as bowls, and furniture upholstered with human skin. Gein admitted to murdering 2 women, Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan, but claimed that most of the remains came from grave robbing, not murder. Gein was declared legally insane and committed to a mental institution where he spent the rest of his life. He died of cancer on July 26, 1984. Although Gein was not a prolific killer, his horrific crimes inspired numerous fictional characters, including Norman Bates in Psycho and Buffalo Bill in The Silence of the Lambs. Gein's story remains a chilling reminder of how isolation, mental illness, and a disturbed upbringing can manifest in horrifying ways, leaving a permanent scar on the collective psyche. Dennis Rader, known as the BTK Killer, bind, torture, kill, terrorized Wichita, Kansas for over 3 decades. Born on March 9, 1945, Rader appeared to lead an ordinary life. He was married, had children, and worked as a compliance officer, even serving as the president of his church's congregation. However, behind this facade of normalcy was a man consumed by sadistic fantasies. Rader began his killing spree in 1974 with the brutal murder of 4 members of the Otero family, including 2 children. His modus operandi involved stalking his victims, breaking into their homes, binding them, and then torturing and killing them. Over the years, Rader claimed 10 victims, each crime meticulously planned and executed. What made Rader particularly infamous was his need for attention. He sent taunting letters to the media and police, describing his crimes in chilling detail and mocking their inability to catch him. These communications allowed him to maintain control and instill fear in the community. However, his arrogance would eventually lead to his downfall. In 2004, Rader resumed sending letters after years of silence. A floppy disk he mailed to police was traced back to him, leading to his arrest in 2005. Rader confessed to the murders and provided chilling details of his crimes during his trial. He was sentenced sentenced to 10 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Rader's case is a stark reminder that evil can lurk behind even the most ordinary appearances. His crimes continue to haunt Wichita and serve as a grim warning about the duality of human nature. Albert Fish, often referred to as the Gray Man or the Brooklyn Vampire, is one of the most depraved serial killers in American history. Born on May 19, 1870, in Washington, D.C., Fish endured a traumatic childhood filled with neglect and abuse. His father died when he was young, and his mother placed him in an orphanage where he was exposed to physical and sexual abuse. This early trauma shaped his disturbing tendencies later in life. Fish led a double life, appearing as a mild-mannered and caring father while secretly indulging in sadistic fantasies involving torture, cannibalism, and murder. He targeted young children, often luring them with promises of candy or jobs. Fish's crimes were particularly heinous, as he derived pleasure from inflicting pain on himself and others, leaving a trail of unimaginable horror. His most infamous crime was the abduction and murder of 10-year-old Grace Budd in 1928. Fish lured Grace under the pretense of taking her to a party, but instead, he tortured and killed her. Years later, he sent a letter to her family detailing the gruesome details of her murder, which ultimately led to his arrest. Fish confessed to the murders of several children and admitted to cannibalizing some of his victims. During his trial, he was found sane but guilty, and he was sentenced to death. On January 16, 1936, Fish was executed by electric chair. Albert Fish's story is a horrifying example of the depths of human depravity. His crimes shocked the nation and solidified his place as one of the most disturbing figures in criminal history. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you learned something, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what types of videos you would like to see from me in the future. Thank you and goodbye.